You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest options platforms in the world. MIAX is now trading options on the SPIKES Volatility Index, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction for confident trading, all for competitive exchange fees. It's time to make a change and give yourself an edge with SPIKES. Learn more about SPIKES at www.miaxoptions.com/spikes. Options involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for information purposes only and are not intended to provide and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everybody. That music can mean only one thing. It is Friday. It is noon Central. It is 1 p.m. Eastern. It is time to embark on the 1-hour cruise that is Volatility Views. I will be your tour guide here on this cruise today. My name is Mark Longo from the OptionsInsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting Options Insider Radio Network. Hope you guys have been enjoying the veritable plethora of content that has been hitting you throughout the week, multiple shows a day. We're recording more behind that are getting lined up for next week and beyond. So a lot of great content coming at you here on the network. If you like what you hear, make sure you keep those reviews coming on whatever show you're listening to, or indeed on the full network, or go to the App Store links and review us in the App Stores. Wherever you like to do it, that's fine. Just keep those reviews coming so folks can continue to discover the network in these troubled times. And keep those questions coming too. We do love to hear from you guys, and joining me once again, doing double duty. He is holding down not only the MIAX hot seat, but the newly minted Matrix Executions hot seat. Want to know more about Matrix? Of course you do. Matrix is an agency-only broker-dealer focused on BEX execution and trading workflow automation. A tech-driven firm, Matrix was founded by options innovators with decades of experience in cutting-edge execution solutions. With unique industry expertise and state-of-the-art assets, Matrix delivers exceptional technology and effective results to demanding institutional professionals. You want to know more? Hit him up over there at matrixexecutions.com. Yes, he's doing a twofer. He's got to spread the cheeks across both seats. He is none other than the Rock Lobster himself, Mr. Andrew GIOVINAZZI from OptionPit.com. By way of Carmen Line Capital, Mr. G, welcome back to the program on this double-duty pre-holiday week, sir.
I'm just trying to get over the cheeks across two seats thing. I was laughing so hard when you said that. I had to beat myself, dude.
I had a feeling you would like that.
I like, because I got my allergies are killing me. My nose is running like I'm good. It was like a gross festival of head fluids coming out of my head. It was laughing so hard.
That's a lovely and indeed a vivid image to leave our audience with as we kick off the show and dive right on into the Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Vol Review, the portion of the show where we do exactly what it says. We break down the week that was, and indeed still is, some volatility, trading, and trending, and analysis, and unusual activity, and all sorts of perspectives. If you guys have a perspective you'd like to share with us here on the show, maybe a topic or a product you want us to discuss here on the program, you know where to find us at Options, most of the major platforms. You can join us live every Friday, noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, via that Mixlr link. That'll get you bumped to the head of the class, if you will, or, of course, questions at theoptionsinsider.com. That all works out there. And what else is working? Well, maybe. I guess it depends what your viewpoint is. It's kind of a weird mixed bag out there. You know, most of the indices have been slightly in the red. S&P off about 1/3%. Dow off about 0.5%. NASDAQ keeps trying to buck the trend. NASDAQ keeps trying to keep its head above water, keeps treading water, trying to stay positive, and it's ever so slightly positive right now, but it's threatening to be pulled down, and it's hard to blame it. There are a lot of dire headlines, even with the vaccine news on the horizon, the near-term headlines. Not exactly good. We have California going back into full 1-month lockdown, the largest economy here in the U.S. here. So that's never good news out there. So a lot of things for the market to digest, a little bit of back and forth squabbling between the Treasury and the Fed about what's going on with their various loan programs out there. So a lot of back and forth to find us here at the end of the week. A mixed week on what has been a mostly up week, except for the last few sessions up there. Spikes coming into showtime at about 23.25. That puts it down about exactly half a handle from last show. So not a lot of vol coming out show to show here on the week. By the way, I should note the T3 folks sending through an alert. We are getting into that phase where Spikes is going to divert a little bit from VIX cash, and that's because we're getting into that moment, which is, of course, the SPY dividend cycle. Spikes, of course, calculated off of SPY options. SPY, everyone forgets until it hits them in the face that SPY has a dividend, and that usually comes around the quarterly cycles, of course, March, June, September, and December. So when we start seeing December options rotated into the Spikes calculation, that's where it starts to get a little bit juicier, and we're starting to get into that zone now. So coming to showtime, we saw Spikes. It was about a point higher. Now it's about 3/4 of a point higher because VIX cash was about 22.5. But still, we might start seeing a little bit of that divergence out there where Spikes has a bit of a premium to the VIX cash. By the way, VIX cash also down about 0.5 point exactly from last show. So in spite of their relative difference in levels, net on the week, the movement was the same. VVIX, a.k.a. the vol of vol, at about 111.5. That puts it down about a little over 4 points, about 4.25 points from last show. So vol is still frothy, but down off of the topsy-turvy levels of 150 and change it hit not too long ago, and even down off of our usual barometer for things are hopping around 120 or so. We're not even at that level. So it's all a lot of wait and see, which, again, we're heading into a holiday week next week, so perhaps not exactly super surprising that everyone's kind of playing the old wait and see game out there. Mr. Rock Lobster, I know you haven't been playing wait and see. You've been watching this vol pretty aggressively, and your cohort there, your alter ego Volman, has also been pretty active. So what's been lighting up your tape, and what has Volman been up to? And also, a related question, is Volman kind of like Clark Kent, so you're Clark Kent now, and then you take off the glasses and you're Volman? Is that how it works?
It could be. I never actually thought of it like that. I never thought of it like that. As far as what's going now, here's like a common sense market critique. So if Mnuchin says on December 31st we're not going to extend the facilities that they have, right? Last night you thought the market was going to totally crash on that news, right? It was pretty bad news.
You think it would not be bullish,
right? But today you've got VIX down 0.5 point. So maybe they have a better idea of how solid the credit markets are right now. Like, at least they're certainly not as bad as they were in March. And whatever the Fed did, it was kind of working. So, maybe, just maybe, you don't need to throw more money at the problem anymore and kind of let things work out. I mean, that's an observation for me here. And the second big thing is, Pfizer is looking for fast track approval. So I think a lot of those things are feeding into sort of, you got the bad news sort of like, oh, the Treasury's not going to do anything. But I mean, in reality, Biden will take over in 20 days. And if they need to really extend it, they will. Right. And I'm sure there's going to be some spending going on January 21st. But at least in the short term, the markets are actually much more stable. At least at Showtime right now, I'm trying to get down to my VIX number that I want from the crystal ball from last time. I think from a vol point of view, we're kind of in a, what I would say, kind of blasé area where the futures are sort of fairly priced. VIX cash is kind of fairly priced. It's just not super interesting. And I think the market's basically waiting for a January, the January runoff in Georgia, which I think is pretty, it's in play. So I think at least from the vol curve, that's where the bulge of the curve is. So that's where the event is. I think at this point, barring some kind of funky thing, the market's pretty much accepted Biden winning, even though it hasn't been certified or anything yet. But I think expect that to happen within the next couple of weeks. And life goes on, If VIX was 35 or 40 right now, I would say would be a lot more flux, but it just isn't there. There isn't there, and we don't have that next level of vol, right? We're in zone 3, not in zone 4. So we're not at that higher level of vol right now. So I think VXX and UVXY in general, like those type of vol products, I think they're just going to have a hard time going anywhere. I think they could just melt kind of slowly but surely, but unless there's a massive surprise, if you think about it, the market can handle credit issue, like the market's handling basically end of a credit facility. It thinks it's going to get a vaccine, and we pretty much know what president we're going to have. The only thing that really is kind of a surprise on the horizon is the election. So as far as vol goes, I think if you're a holder of UVXY or VXX, even though you're looking at these numbers and saying, wow, these are like the low numbers of the year, right? And you're like, yeah, these are the lows. Like UVXY, this is at a year low. It was at $50 in June. And you're thinking man, it's going back there. I'm just telling you, there's quite a weight on it. And you would need the market to do something spectacular, a spectacular surprise to get those vol products moving up. So, I would just say, as far as that goes, it's an issue for the products. I just think there's a lot of weight on them. So I don't expect to see a lot of fireworks unless, of course, we have some funky surprise at this point.
Well, 2020 is the year of funky surprises, so I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but we have seen one or two or a legion of unpredictable and usually undesirable curveballs coming our way here in the year of our Lord 2020. Let's look out to the futures landscape. You kind of touched on it, Mr. Rock Lobster. I want to come back to it. Of course, we know Spikes futures still halted. We're waiting. Pay attention to that myxoptions.com/Spikes page on the press releases. You'll know there, maybe even before we do, that the futures are coming back, but they have hinted and intimated that they're coming back before the end of the year, so you'll have those futures to trade in your hot little hands pretty soon. Out there on the VIX futures front, you kind of pointed it out. It's an interesting point of contention here, Mr. Rock Lobster. Coming into Showtime, we saw, of course, that no future off the board. Now, listeners, DEES is our front month contract. We saw DEES at about a little north of 1.5, about 1.6 points premium to the cash. That puts it almost a quarter of a point lower, but kind of around the range that it was this time last show in terms of its premium to the cash. The Jan future, though, as Rock Lobster pointed out, got a little bit of juice packed in there. A little over 3 points, about 3.1 points to the cash coming into Showtime. That puts it almost 1.5 points higher, almost double what it was this time last week. So obviously they're pricing a little bit of juice, a little bit of kerfuffle in around that Jan period. Now that could be taken a couple of ways. That could be taken as, maybe they think Mr. Trump not exactly going to go gently into that good night, going to fight this thing all the way through to January 20th, make the transition as difficult as he possibly can. They could be pricing that in. It could also be, as you mentioned, Mr. Rock Lobster, all of a sudden, all eyes on Georgia. And Kelly and her other senator running down there used to be CEO of BACT, and of course is the wife of Jeff Sprecher over there at ICE, now a Georgia senator, and involved all of a sudden in the race of races, the race that everyone is watching down there in Georgia. So interesting times out there. So Mr. Rock Lobster, sounds like you're seeing this same little wrinkle, a little hiccup in the VIX futures that are coming in around January. It sounds like you think it's mostly due to Georgia, or do you think maybe it's a little bit too of, hey, this guy's not exactly going to cede power without a bit of a dust up?
Well, there could be the dust up thing, but ultimately, I don't know how much dusting you could do. Ultimately, like, the law will be the law, and the guy's got a couple $1 billion worth of assets in the United States. Like, what's he going to do? When he's done being president, he's got to go somewhere. What's he going to do? So I think they're going to pursue, but this president kind of only goes in one direction until, he hits a brick wall. And since there's no brick wall yet, I'm sure he'll just follow what he does most of the time and just, continue to challenge until there's no challenges left, whatever the legal remedies are. So some people like him for that. Other people don't. So at least I think the vote count kind of told you. So I think it's mostly the Georgia thing, the Georgia election. I think that will be the carryover as far as that goes. Other than that, but again, anything could be a surprise. I would say you would see a little bit more bid maybe for some options than you are right now if they were that worried about it. It's just, if the bid's not there, it's not there, at least right now. It doesn't mean people are wrong, but I think that's kind of what's going on.
It is funny. If you had told me a while back that, a woman that I have met multiple times was always very nice and courteous and very pleasant, would be at the heart of one of the most bitter and contested senatorial races in history, and also would be painting herself as a bit of a, extreme candidate out there, I would have been very surprised. But c'est la vie, this is the year 2020. Anything can happen out there, and certainly the fact that Georgia is now the center of our political spectrum, also a bit of a surprise. At least they did finish their recount down there, and it sounds like nothing changing from that perspective. But that isn't sucking much of the juice, if any, out of that Jan future. Why do you think the Jan future is so big? Listeners, hit us up. Let us know. Let's head on out to the options front now. As we said, Spike's futures still halted, so we're waiting for more information out there before we really see a lot more paper start flowing back in. No contracts rolling off the board in Spike, so the big positions are still the meaty ones, and they're out there in Dees and Feb now. We got let's see, the Dees 80 puts, number 4, Dees 28 calls, number 3, Dees 75 puts. A lot of meaty and beefy positions, except for those Dees 28s, and the Feb 11 calls, number 1 out there. So all sorts of interesting strikes. Looks like a lot of people trying to approximate their own futures positions out there. I'd expect once we see the futures come back, A, more volume will come in, and then B, those trades will start to normalize around near at the money contracts like most other products on the planet. Let's head on out there to VIX land now and see what's going on out there in the mothership. It has been an interesting resurgence out there in VIX options land so far. We talked about it before, and it wasn't that long ago, that VIX options were threatening to break 300,000 a day in terms of daily volume out there. Now we have resurged the other way. It's up 601. 601,000 is now the new ADV out there. That puts it up 14,000 from last week, and effectively double from what it was a month and change ago out there. Not a ton on the tape today, but we'll get to that in a second. Only 201,000 contracts on the tape today. But first, let's break down what's been lighting it up out there. What are the hot, the big, the most active, the most sizable positions out there in VIX options land? Mr. Rock Lobster, before we get going, take your eyes away from the notes for a second. I can trust you not to cheat. This has been an ongoing discussion point with myself and your work wife there, the meatball, that we're in rare times. For the last few weeks now on the show, we've seen only one call in the top 10 of the VIX options landscape. I will tell you this week, that is no longer the case. So I leave it to you to guess. How many calls do you think we have in our top 10 this week, sir? Is it a call palooza? Is it kind of light on the calls? What are you feeling out there, sir?
That's an interesting one. I'm going to say, and I didn't cheat, but Let's see. I'm going to say there's 3 of 10.
Not a bad guess, sir. Not a bad guess at all. It's actually 2 of 10, so you were close. We got one more call this week than we had last week, but that in and of itself, pretty huge percentage gain. A big change out there. Let's break down the top 10 size open interest positions, what you folks have on out there in VIX land right now. Number 10. We got the Feb 17 puts. I do believe, yes, on those, and one other Feb on the list here. Feb 17 puts cost you 134,000 contracts to break into the top 10. That's a little bit more respectable than it has been, but still not a ton out there. Number 9, also 134,000 of the DEES 65 calls. That's our first of 2 calls in the top 10 these days, listeners. Number 8, also 134,000. That's the magic number in VIX land today. And number 8 and number 9 separated by about 70 contracts. Number 8 is the Feb 15 put, so back out to Feb, our second and final Feb on the list. Then we go to number 7, 144,000 of the DEES 21 puts. Number 6, $1.48 of the DEES 25 puts. Number 5, our second and final call on the list, 160,000, almost even, of the Jan 40s, 4-0 call. So interesting call strikes, 40s and 65. It's only calls you can find out there. Number 4, $1.66 of the March 17 puts, our first and only March. On the top 10, numero dos here, we got 233,000 of the DEES 23 puts. Then we got our usual DEES put strip to break out the rest of the top 10 here. Number 2, about $250,000 of the DEES 22 puts. Number 1 with a bullet, 336,000 of the DEES 20 puts. So you got to get all the way up to pretty much number 1 to even surpass $250,000 out there. So not a ton of paper open, about 6.5 million. Of course, again, Nove coming off the board recently, so not a ton of paper open. But it is put dominated, about 3.5 million on the puts and about 3 million on the calls. So again, you know anything about VIX, you know that's not a usual case, but it has been for the better part of the past few weeks here, closing in on a month or so. Now I would say that we started to see that situation out there. Let's go on out to the landscape, see what was trading it up out there this week. Like we said, not a ton on the tape today. There was, about 201,000 contracts up in VIX as of a few minutes ago. That's not a ton, but again, back when it was threatening 300K, that would be a lot. So we have, let's see, the top 5 out there today, most active contracts. DEES 40s, once again, the DEES 40 strength, interesting. 23,500. Number 2, DEES 60s, 20,000, pretty much even. Number 3, DEES 50. So all calls today. That's kind of interesting. About 20,000 of those as well. Number 4, DEES 23 puts, 11,000. And round out the top 5 out there today, we've got the DEES 20 puts with 9,000 and change. Heading on out to Thursday, a little bit more paper, 453,000 on the tape. Number 1 with a bullet, going out to Jan, the Jan 40s this time here, which is also one of our top 10 positions at number 5 there. So interesting. 40 strike getting some love out there this week. Jan 40s, 21,400. Number 2, Jan 26s. A little bit more relevant and reasonable strike there. 20,000 almost even. Number 3, DEES 30s, 18,000. Number 4, Jan 24 puts, 17,600. And around out the top 5 on Thursday, DEES 65 calls, 17,000. So a lot of calls we're trading this week. Just not enough to really budge the OI to any sizable extent. Wednesday. Let's go back to Wednesday. 445,000 out there as well. So pretty similar volume Thursday and Wednesday. The big prints, 52, almost 53,000 of the DEES 45 calls. So calls we're trading this week, listeners. Again, just not enough to break into the top 10 out there. Followed by number 2, 28,000 of the DEES 30 calls. Number 3, 28,000 as well, the DEES 18 puts. Number 4, 25,000 of the DEES 60 calls. And round out the top 5 on Wednesday, 24,000, almost even, of the Jan 40. So calls again. Most of the top 5 in most of the days we've been talking about this week have been calls. Kind of an interesting trend. Let's go out to Tuesday. That was the most active day by a country mile out there this week. 1.04 million contracts on the tape. The big prints out there this time, input land. DEES 20 puts, 84,000 of those bad boys on the tape. Number 2, DEES 22 puts. So that nice little DEES put strip getting some action out there. 65,000 of those for number 2. Number 3, 60K of the Nove 25 puts. Those are obviously done and gone off the board now. Number 4, 55,000 of the Jan 19 puts, and round out the top 5, also 55,000 of the Dees doubles, the Dees 55 calls. So a pretty hot day out there. And once again, now at that day, it was 4 of the top 5 were on the put side of the fence, but that was the few days that was bucking the trends. Let's see if Monday can buck the trend as well. Yes, it can. All the top 5 on the put side of the ledger. 536,000 contracts on the tape on Monday. Number 1, Nove, 23 puts, 51,000 of those. Number 2, 32,000 of the Jan, 22 puts. Back to the 22 strike for number 3 for the Nove 22 puts, 30,000. If that wasn't enough 22 puts, you also got them for number 4, the Dees 22 puts with 25,000. And round out the top 5 here, we got Nove 26 puts with 23, almost 24,000. So, Mr. Rock Lobster, an interesting narrative unfolding out here in VIX options. As we said in the top 10, we have seen effectively a doubling of the number of calls in the top 10, but it's only gone from 1 to 2. We also saw, for 3 of the 5 days this week, we saw calls dominating the top 5 out there, which is kind of interesting. Yet obviously not enough to break into the top 10 of overall size positions out there. So a couple of interesting trends at work out there in the options front this week, sir. What came across your tape? What caught the eye of you and your crazies in the pit chat? And when you take off the glasses, what caught the X-ray vision of Volmancer?
I think that's quite funny. I mean, really, one thing I've noted, I feel like I sold some put flies today or closed them for December. I feel like the vol's kind of compressing a little bit. There is, I would say, if anything, that kind of feels like I guess the only real trend I feel like there is there's just it's very blah. It's like it's a blah type of vol market. There isn't a huge bid for the vol. We're the only, and we've been in zone 3 now for I think 2 weeks, which is the first time since March, by the way. So I think if anything, this the virus vaccine has taken vol down and kept it in zone 3 for 2 weeks now. Anytime at least the way I look at vol, anytime you move zones and stay there, it's always significant because the market is definitely, what's weird is I think some governors in some states are not, the market is looking at something a little differently than they are, I think. They got their own problems to deal with and they're doing whatever. But realistically, the level of volatility has come down and stayed down to the next level, which is always significant because, vol can't go down until it goes down, until people are willing to sell it at lower prices. So I think right now, that's what we have. I think we have lower vol. And the only question is when do we actually get out of the 20s? The election is holding it up. Maybe Donald's sticking around in office and not telling people he's going to leave anytime soon. That might change in 2 weeks, though. I think, if anything, that will be one more piece of certainty done. But I think there feels like, and I'm just looking at how the upside calls are performing because, I usually have some sort of combination of calls and puts. And they just don't like the upside calls right now. So if you own them and you're wondering why isn't the ball going up or there just isn't a bid for it. And I think realistically, you gotta have a bid for the vol for it to go up. And it's just, at least as for today, it's not there. So, for you to buy call, I think if you're buying VIX calls, I think you're actually buying underlying as well, like possible Santa Claus rally, possible Pfizer getting early approval. I even just talked to the meatball. He's saying, there's 800,000 or 1 million doses of a COVID treatment in Texas that are going to be available, like by the end of the month. So I'm not sure that, I think there's a lot of different currents going on, but usually if you have a positive current and a negative current when it comes to vol land, you just don't have a lot of vol action. Kind of one cancels the other out and it makes things sort of go down. So the fact that I think people are buying some calls, I think it's more of a realized vol trade. They just want to pick up, they want to be long vol just in case, but they want their downside and their upside, and they just figure one of them are going to pay bigger than the other. And I think that's the type of trade you might see happening as we get closer into the end of the year, maybe through January. Kind of similar to what SoftBank, right? They just bought up everything. And, they basically bought a lot of gamma. Just, things went up and all their value of all their stuff exploded upward. And I think that's, somebody just owns a relatively inexpensive VIX call, for $1 or, 80 cents, 90 cents, stuff like that. Some of the volume that you're seeing, that you're reporting here, that is a pretty cheap hedge if you want to buy lots of SPY calls, right? Or own the SPY. Those are all relatively inexpensive ways to do it. I mean, you're outlining 50 calls, you're outlining 40 calls. I mean, that kind of stuff is sort of just in case things get really messy. And you could look at that as a trade where I want to be long near, I want to be long, but I only really want my hedge to kick in if things go crazy, because I'm just not. I'm kind of expecting, I'm expecting like kind of that, you want just curvature. You want to make money if the market moves, basically, just up or down. Just give me something. And I think if we start seeing more calls, it's probably going to be because of that. Another thing we could look at is, what's the upside skew look like in, SPX calls? Is it starting to flatten up a little bit as people buy those calls up? So I think that's certainly that's a possibility with some of these call buyers. So, I mean, those are relatively big chunks of calls, but until it gets overwhelming, or I start to see some crazy future premium, all I'm seeing is like slightly elevated premium. It's not even, it's not even that big, to be honest. It's just a little bigger than normal. Nothing like we saw in September or August when the futures were $5, $6, $7. I can't even remember. I remember just putting a tweet out, I think once, like, we're all going to look back on this and say, well, this was the biggest tell ever, right? Because the futures were so enormously bid. Like, somebody thinks something's going to happen, which it did. But right now, there's, at least from a Telegraph point of view, there's a little bit of worry, but there's not a ton yet. It could change, but relative to this year, it's pretty low, actually. Actually, it's as low as it's been since the whole COVID thing started. So just for listeners, if you're looking at vol, looking for all these spreads and stuff like this, it's definitely the lowest level since it all got bad. So you could take that for what it's worth. It's heartening if you're a bull or you want to be a long-term investor, and there's still some juice out there to sell if you like selling juice and acquiring stock at lower levels or something like that. It's still out there. So an interesting time, but I don't know. I think the only thing the vol's telling us right now is it's the lowest it's been since the COVID started, and sometimes you just take it for what it's worth, that we just have lower vol and not expecting anything crazy going on.
I will take it for what it's worth. Of course, it'd be worth much more if Volman was telling me and not his alter ego, the Rock Lobster. Now, that guy has some credibility with me. The Rock Lobster, I don't know, it ebbs and flows. Yes, mild-mannered Rock Lobster. And then need a suit. There's a lot we could do with this. We'll workshop it after the show. Meanwhile, let's move on out now to the product. The Rock Lobster said at the top of the show has a lot of weight on it, one of the many. The product you guys love to fade. Yes, it is VXX coming into Showtime, or I should say actually a little while ago. It was about 18.4 or so. Puts it down about 0.6 of a point from last show. So I had about a 19 on our last show last week. Coming into this segment, we got about 117,000 contracts on the tape, so not even half of a day's worth of paper. The ADV has crept up pretty substantially out there. It's at about almost 250,000 contracts a day out there. That's up about 2,000 from last show. It's not a big bump from last week, but over the last couple of months, it has ticked up quite a bit. As I said, today, not a ton of paper lighting things up out there. You got the Nove 18.5. So you spent a lot of time talking about how there's a big weight on these products, Mr. Rock Lobster, a.k.a. Volman. And the number one contract out there in VXX are the Nove 18.5 calls, sir. So no one's listening to you out there. They're just gobbling up calls left and right. Looks like a bunch of these went up on the bid, actually. So could be some overwriting out there, about 7,000 going up there for number one. Number two, most active out there today are the Nove 18 puts, followed by about 5,000 of the Nove 19 calls. Let's go out to the top 10, though, and see. That's a little bit more informative in terms of the trends out there. It looks like, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Oh, interesting. We have had a bit of a swing, Mr. Rock Lobster, because on the last show, well, for a while there, it was only one call out there as well. Then last show, it was 80-20 puts to calls, so only 2 calls in the top 10. This week, we have evolved a little bit more. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 calls in the top 10. So calls taking the lead back again out there in VXX land. Cost you 19, almost 20,000 contracts to break into the top 10 in VXX listeners. That gets you all the way to the Nove 24 calls. These are expiring, obviously, on the 27th. The rest of these are going away today, a lot of them. So this top 10 is going to change markedly on our next show. But for right now, this is what we got. Number 9, 20,500 of the Nove 20 puts. Number 8, 23,500 of the Nove 40 calls, 4-0. Number 7, 23,700 of the Nove 16 puts. Number 6, 25K, pretty much even, of the Nove 21 calls. Number 5, 25,800 of the Nove 38s. Interesting strike selection out there. Number 4, 27,000 of the Jan, out to Jan now for the first time. Jan 25 calls. Number 3, 27,500 of the Jan 18 puts. Numero dos here, 32, almost 33,000 of the Nove 30 calls. And number 1 with a bullet out there in VXX right now, 63,000 of the Jan 15 puts. So interesting stuff out here. So let me ask you what, if any, interesting prints came across your radar out there in VXX options this week, Mr. Rock Lobster. And then B, I would also ask you if your cohort here, Mr. Shortvol, he hit us up this week, wanted to know if we saw this. He said, I'll use his verbiage here. Does this look messed up to anyone else? Did someone make a mistake? Someone bought 600 puts paying 8 cents in VXX and 600 puts paying 12 cents, then sold them back 2 minutes later for a penny. What is this? And you can look at, he sent a little graph of his time and sales here. I haven't had a chance to dig these up for myself. Maybe I'll do a little digging while you're talking, Mr. Rock Lobster. But it looks like on his graph that he sent out, his chart, someone trading the Dees 14 puts in VXX 605 times for 12 cents, and then 624 times for 12 cents, 605 times for 8 cents, and then less than 2 minutes later, about a minute and a half later, they traded 1,400 times on the bid for a penny. So, yeah, that's a bit of a weird print. Again, if you're the guy who paid 12 cents for him a minute and a half earlier, or even 8 cents, you're probably not too happy. I'd be surprised if they were just dumping them that quickly, and that's all they could find. But that is a weird print. He followed up to say, it looks really odd for a couple of reasons. One, with the wide market, they paid the offer. Then when they were faded by 4 cents, paid the offer again. And then 2 minutes later, a very similar number of trades on the bid. So weird stuff. Hey, Mr. Rock Lobster, did you notice your friend Mr. Shortvol's weird, I would call them wash, but they didn't exactly wash them. They lost some money on these bad boys. But position-wise, pretty much wash puts. And then B, anything else catching your eye out there in VXX options this week, sir?
Yeah, I did see Dave's. It just seems like somebody screwed up. I mean, I'm buying them, but I screwed up, and now I'm going to sell them. I don't know why you would take a penny for them if you just spent 8 cents. You know, like maybe you can't have them open on your sheets. Sometimes some of the broker dealers don't allow you to buy VXX puts because it will imply an eventual short VXX share position, and they don't want you to exercise your puts and take short stock that they cannot deliver. So that's actually a thing with some of the broker dealers that you're dealing with. You know, I guess I date myself when I say that, but the wirehouse guys, like the Schwabs and all that stuff. I don't know if it's Schwab, but I do know there are other groups that do that. They won't let you buy puts because it'll be an eventual short. Of course, you're not obligated to exercise them. You could always, just sell them and close them out. But anyway, I digress on that one a little bit. But I don't understand that trade at all. I think somebody just screwed up. But why sell them for a penny after you've already screwed up? That makes absolutely no sense to me at all. Why you would do that? I'm kind of scratching my head on that one, to be honest. But as far as VXX goes, like I said, I think VXX is more of a like buying a put spread or like put fly, something that's kind of just sort of slow and creaky downward. What you will notice, though, is like the vol of all the upside calls are slowly declining a little bit. There's not a lot there. Relative for this period of time. Remember, VIX is still 22, which is historically pretty high. And again, there's good reason for it. But the bid for vol that we saw probably 2 weeks ago across the board, especially vol, not just the actual level of VIX cash, but also how much somebody was willing to pay for options, is pretty much down last 2 weeks. So to me, that looks like a trend that will probably continue through the holidays, especially as more news comes out vaccine-wise. I still think that like the vaccine type of trade, if the vaccine is the FDA doesn't approve it, I think you could see a lot of sadness coming back market-wise. Like, oh, how long is it going to be? And so that I think could be a temporary 1 to 2 day kind of sadness. But if somebody kicks the FDA in the right way and maybe they like the vaccine, I think that, again, using VXX like a long call and long SPY could be a decent trade if you want to kind of hedge your long exposure that way.
Yeah, I'm looking here at some of these weird prints that Dave was talking about here on that day. Yeah, it looks like more of these things traded. It looks like 1,300 of these D14 puts also traded for 10.8 cents, 1,368 times around the exact same time. And then another 686 traded for 0.073 cents. So weird splits. So yeah, that 1,412 that went up for a penny 2 minutes later, that seems like a weird aberration. Oh, you know what? It might have been a spread because there was some there printing crossed about the same time as that for 2 cents as well. Yeah, these prints are all over the place. They're trading through the offer and then through the bid a few minutes later. That's where I like your notion there, Mr. Rock Lobster, that he got the tap on the shoulder either from the risk manager or from the broker dealer saying, no, you can't hold these. I feel bad for the guy if he had to dump them at a penny. Can't find any bid for these things. That seems unlikely, but the prints are there. They do not lie. Let's head on out there to UVXY, another product you guys have some thoughts on. We'll see if we can get to those in the mail a little bit later. But coming at showtime, it was about 12.3, puts it down almost a little north of 0.75 of a point from last week. The ADV is about 154,000 contracts. That's ticking up a little bit as well. Today we saw about 60,000 contracts on the tape coming into showtime. Let's just see if that has ticked up at all as we've been chatting here today. 57,000. Not a ton. It's not bad for UVXY. Yeah, it's about 75,000 out there right now. Let's look really quickly what the top large open interest contracts at large positions out there. The meaty calls that used to be the big dog out here. There are still, someone pointed out on Twitter this week, we had, of course, James from Hercules on not too long ago on the show, and someone pointed out that there are still some positions out there in UVXY and on the 10 strike, which is, of course, where he was. In fact, number 9 out there are the D's 10 calls with about 9,400 and the March 10 calls with about 9,500. So it is possible that he, after he publicly claiming he was done with it, and certainly he did liquidate a large amount of his contracts out there. It is possible that he has repositioned. Also, the 10 puts are open for about 11,000 in January. And then the top 5 are the March 13 puts with 11,500, number 4, 17,900 of the Jan 11 puts, number 3, 21, almost 22,000 of the Jan 14 puts. Numero dos here, 28, almost 29,000 of the Jan 13 puts. And number 1 with a bullet out here in UVXY this week are the Jan 12 puts with about 34,600. So it is possible James and his team have reopened not that much size. They had a lot more on the 10 strike in the past, but maybe they're back. That would be kind of interesting. You know what else is back is earnings season. We'll hit on it really quickly here, listeners, and we'll get to some of your questions because I know you got some in store for us this week. This was still another hot and heavy week. I know it's been macro-dominated, but it is a hot and heavy week. Walmart was Tuesday. Home Depot out there on Tuesday as well. We had Kohl's and NEO. Big dog out there, NEO, these days. Took the number 1 spot in single-name options most actives recently. That's trumping Tesla and Apple. That's no mean feat. Then we had Target and Lowe's and NVIDIA on Wednesday. Thursday, Macy's, Intuit, BJ's, and Friday, today, we had Foot Locker. Of course, we have earnings move results, and earnings season reports for you guys to check out. You know the price, completely free. You know where to find them, theoptionsinsider.com. I'll look at a couple for you. You guys can spend hours diving into these tickers if you're so inclined. Looking here at NVIDIA, that was a big one this week. They came out and pretty much blew the doors off on just about every facet you could think of out there. Just beat on everything, raised their guidance, and so, of course, the stock getting hit. But coming into their announcement, they were pricing in about 6%. They were at 537.15, and they delivered, at least going into this report, which is, again, clipped at the time of the report, about 1.4%. But looking here now, they're only down about 5 handles from where they were. So they have moved a little. Actually, they're up from where they were at the time of the report. They were 529.38. Now they're at 532.12. So they have lost even less. So they moved even less net. So if you sold that premium and you just held on to it for a little bit, you did pretty well in NVIDIA. And that's kind of been the theme of the year, listeners, when it comes to earning volatility. Don't buy it. It's just a blood red season out here. Let's look at BJ's. BJ's, they were on the 19th before the bell. They were at $43 even. They were pricing in 7.8%. And guess this, listeners, they delivered less than 2%, 1.9%. Let's see where they are right now. Maybe a little bit of movement has popped in. No, they're at 41.74. So they're about less than half a buck below where they were at this report. So they moved a little over 2%. So they moved a little bit more to the downside. But again, you're not getting a lot of bang for your buck. In fact, so far on the season, listeners, you're getting approximately 71 cents for every $1 you spend in straddle juice, in straddle premium out there. The only week that has broken even was week 5 at exactly 100%. Everything else has been a money loser, and those first 3 weeks were pretty bad. So bear that in mind if you're out there trading the earnings out there. Now let's see what you guys have in store for us. It is time to check the volatility voicemail.
It's time to share your thoughts and opinions with your fellow volatility traders. It's time to check the volatility voicemail. Make your voice heard by dialing 779-669-4VOL. Posting a comment on the optionsinsider.com, sending an email to questions@theoptionsinsider.com, or posting your questions to twitter.com/options or facebook.com/theoptionsinsider.
All right, let's do it. Let's unleash the hordes. Mr. Rock Lobster, we'll start with this one. Intraday Trade 100 was listening to the show earlier when you made the comments that if you're holding UVXY or VXX, there's still quite a weight on those products, and he seems like he's a little confused. He says, what do you mean by there is quite a weight on these products? You don't need to repeat yourself. You kind of broke it down a little bit at the top of the show, but maybe if you could summarize your view on what is dragging these products right now, sir. What is weighing on them, literally, as you said. I have at it for Intraday Trade 100.
Well, so UVXY and VXX owns the DEES and the JAN, right? And the DEES, I would say, is a relatively, a normalish kind of premium over the cash, the way we look at the numbers. And the JAN's a little more expensive. So the JAN is sort of already pre-priced, right? So since those products already own those futures, remember, in order for those products, UVXY and VXX, to go up, those futures have to go up. And with the cash kind of sinking a little bit, UVXY and VXX own those products. And just every day that goes by, unless you have, a jump in VIX cash, and right now it has to be a pretty good jump, those products are just going to sort of like slowly melt, because that's the way they're structured. So unless you have a big kick in the cash, like we talked about all the reasons that we could have one possibly, even though it looks less likely, the products are just going to melt a little every day. So when I say wait, it's just, it's the fact that those products own futures, and those futures right now are set up to to decay, to lack of a better word, just kind of rot a little bit every day, just like if you owned options and those rotted. That's the weight on the product. Just they own decaying assets, and right now they are decaying, a little bit every day. You could kind of calculate the theoretical decay. It's probably like somewhere between 4 and 6 cents per day. Again, theoretical, not like, you open your pocket and it just goes in there. But as you can see, the VIX cash is going down and those products are going down as well. So everything's just, I would say melt. It is melting with a weight on top of it.
Melty and indeed delicious. Scoop it up. A little bit of chocolate fudge on top. VXX, quite delicious. Wouldn't you concur, Mr. Volman?
Mr. Volman would concur on that one. He would, his little red stick figure would be standing on top of the futures, and he'd kind of jumping up and down on them, making them go down, basically.
Interesting stuff. A lot of interesting stuff you guys have on your brain. I know VolTwit was all a Twitter, pun intended, this week, talking about, going back to an older episode we did a few weeks back with Jim from Hercules Investments, and about the use case for UVXY and what was going on from that perspective. It's an interesting conversation. I don't think we have time to really get into all of it right now. Plus, I want to save it for when the meatball's here, because he was actually on that show, and I know he has some thoughts on this as well. But we hear you guys. It's an interesting conversation, and we're going to get into that. But yeah, it always is interesting to hear the perspectives of what I would call traditional fund managers and asset managers when they're trading a more esoteric product, a little bit more down the rabbit hole, like a UVXY. And he certainly wasn't a fan of it until he was. He had size positions on all things that are somewhat interesting and seem like they're somewhat at loggerheads. And it seemed like you guys had some thoughts on that as well. So we'll get to all that, I think, on an upcoming show when we have a little bit more time. Now we got to keep on rolling right on into the most difficult, the most dangerous segment in all of podcasting, listeners. Yes, it is time, once again, for the crystal ball.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crystal Ball, the portion of the show where we attempt valiantly, some may say futilely, to wrestle with the slippery pig that is volatility for yet another week. Though I will say, not looking too bad. We were all pretty tight last week when it comes to our markets last week. I was at 22.75, so I was on the upside there. Mr. Matt Amberson from Orats, a.k.a. the Sharp-Dressed Man, a.k.a. the Oracle of New Hampshire, was at about a 22.25. And Andrew the Rock Lobster was at about a 22 even. And coming into showtime, Spikes, a.k.a. the index that we have said before is the tiebreaker, is just ticked up. It's a little bit north of 23, 23.03. That puts you about a quarter of a handle away on there. Now, VIX cash obviously vacillating around quite a bit. I have it at about almost 22.25, 22.33. So that puts Matt about 0.08 away on his VIX cash prognostication. So Matt's closer on the VIX cash, but I'm closer on the spikes. But still, if it's about a quarter of a point away or so, I guess I'll be nice. I like Matt, and I will give it to Mr. Matt out there on the VIX, even though I was pretty darn close to a bullseye on the spikes side. The Rock Lobster wasn't close to anything, so we won't give it to him. And since Matt is not here, I guess I will go first. I will be charitable, Mr. Rock Lobster, because I win. therefore, by default. And I will choose to go first or go last. And I know you like to go last to scum people, so I will set the table for you. I will pave the way. I will set the runway lights for you so you can just guide the plane right in and try to scum me. So far, it hasn't been working for you. But hey, whatever makes you feel better, Mr. Rock Lobster. So here we are. We're coming in to a holiday week next week. So we're going to have a truncated trading schedule next week. Listeners, of course, this time, I'm not sure. I'll have to check to see if we're even going to have a show for the Black Friday madness, which is, of course, not as much of a thing as it was, let's say, a year ago. A lot of people not leaving their homes. Online Black Friday. Everything's Cyber Monday now, apparently. But, yeah, so we'll see if we have a show next week. So this may be a prognostication we have to check back in 2 weeks out here. But let's say for right now, for where we're going to be this time next week. Now, we talked about the weight on all the volatility. There are some things lurking. Vaccine approval. What's going on with the recount. I think we'll have a little bit more clarity on some of these. I'm going to say, dare I say it? Dare I say we break the 20? I'm not going to go quite that far. I'm going to say we're going to be, as of this time next week, I'm going to say we'll be threatening the 20 handle, but not quite there. I'm going to say 20 double, 20.55. All right, Mr. Rock Lobster, there it is. The runway lights are lit. Volman just has to guide the plane in. Where are you going to go, sir?
I have to say that's a very bold prediction for you, Mr. Longo.
I've been known to be bold,
very
and also
bold.
Got a few bullseyes every now and then, so not bad.
After declaring victory for yourself on your show once again, I'll 20.55 is pretty good. I think they're actually taking a bit of the holiday out, at least a chunk. I'm going to go. I'm actually going to go full handle higher and say 21.55.
Wow. Weird times where you're above me, sir, in this madness. But you're right. They could already be aggressively taking some of that juice out, in which case we could see some of that coming back. So that's our market, a full 1 point exactly wide market, listeners. Me playing the rear downside level at 20 double, and Mr. Rock Lobster up a little bit north of me at 21.55. Unfortunately, that music means we come to the end of yet another epic sojourn through the world of volatility. If you like it, listeners, make sure you keep those reviews coming in your platform of choice. If you have questions, comments, maybe a product you want us to talk about, a trade you saw go up, those kind of weird, like Mr. Lincoln did, those weird kind of vanishing VXX puts, or whatever else is on your radar, hit us up. You know where to find us. We're the only folks out there really talking about this stuff. So come check us out. We've been doing this for quite some time. We're kind of the OGs, certainly on the Vol podcasting side. And we'll talk you off the ledge. We'll keep you sane in these troubled times. But before we go, let's go back around the horn. Mr. Rock Lobster, if folks are intrigued, maybe they want to check out, we were going to talk about some of the stuff like FCEL that was lighting it up this week and everything else. Didn't have a chance to get to that, but that one's been causing some crazy single name vol. I know it's also been lighting up your tape over there in the Robinhood land. So if folks want to hit up the Robinhood, maybe they want to get a little, or I should say the Little John, which focuses on Robinhood, or perhaps they want to get a little bit of vol learning on. Maybe they want to meet Volman himself. Where should they go? What should they do?
They can go to optionbit.com, go to memberships. We might have a Little John space or two left. I'm not sure. But, our Vol Trade Club, or Mark's Vol Edge product, he's totally kicking butt this year. He's been eating his Wheaties every morning, apparently, but quite astonishing results, actually. Which I invite people to come on over, send a note to me, Andrew at optionbit.com, or Alicia, Licia, at optionbit.com, or Mark at optionbit.com. And you go, open up the page and check it out for yourself. So they're not too bad. Let's just say
so. There are finite seats in the Robinhood. If 100 listeners want to go sign up right now, they can't do it. It's finite.
No, because we don't want to screw up the liquidity of the trade. So it's a certain amount. And that's it. That's all. And that's all she wrote. I know, hard to believe, but
there you go. Get while the getting's good over there in the land of the pit. That FCEL. Those calls certainly have been working out. You know what else is working out? A little thing called MyAxOptions.com/spikes. That's where you go to get all of the info, listeners, we talked about here on the show. So you want that info about the spikes historical data. Maybe you want the info, some of the alerts about, what's going on for how spikes is diverging or getting closer to VIX cash. You can sign up for those over there as well. Get on that list for those T3 alerts. You get historical data. You get the press releases so you know exactly when the futures are coming back. And, of course, you get a link to this fine show. I ask you once again, what more could you possibly want from a volatility-oriented destination? MyAxOptions.com/spikes is the place to go. And while you're searching for stuff online, head on over to MatrixExecutions.com. They are an agency-only broker-dealer focused on best X and trading workflow automation. A tech-driven firm, Matrix was founded by options innovators with decades of experience in cutting-edge execution solutions. With unique industry expertise and state-of-the-art assets, Matrix delivers exceptional technology and effective results to demanding institutional professionals. If you have questions, just hit them up. info@matrixexecutions.com, or head to the website, matrixexecutions.com, to learn more. And on behalf of the Rock Lobster, let's throw the meatball in there as well as our friends over there at MyAx and our friends over there in Matrix Land, and indeed myself, I thank all of you out there for downloading, streaming, subscribing. Stay safe as you come into this holiday week. And we'll see if we see you again next Friday. Otherwise, we'll see you back here the subsequent week for another episode of Volatility Views.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MyAx, one of the fastest options platforms in the world. MyAx is now trading options on the Spikes Volatility Index, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction for confident trading, all for competitive exchange fees. It's time to make a change and give yourself an edge with Spikes. Learn more about Spikes at www.myaxoptions.com/spikes. Options involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for information purposes only and are not intended to provide and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.